All right, and I do make it 8 o'clock, sorry, 6 o'clock. So we'll make a start, but before we start on the substitutes, I'd just like to welcome Councillor George Robinson and Councillor Sylvia Darker for attending this evening. It's something that we've been pushing for a few months, so it's pleased to see two councillors happy to join in with the discussion. And I think we agreed as a committee that when councillors do sit in on these meetings, they can sit around the table and contribute, but of course they don't have an actual vote. So if you want to make any points, just indicate and we'll bring you into the discussions. Thank you. So the next item, substitutes nominated for this meeting, and apologies.
There have been no apologies and no substitutes, Chair.
I've got apologies to give on behalf of Councillor Evans. He's going to try and make it along in a bit, but it's clashing with another work engagement he's got at the moment.
Right, thank you. So remind members to declare an interest as and where necessary in the proceedings. Item 3, admission to the public. This is one of the rare meetings where we have an item which is not fully open to the public. So item 8 is I'd like to move that we make this exempt for the public due to paragraph 3 for financial and business affairs. Is somebody happy to second that? Right, thank you, Jane. Is everybody all in favour? Yes. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee on the 4th of August. Is everybody happy with those?
Yes, I'm happy to move them as a correct record of the meeting, Chair.
All right. Is that seconded? Yeah, thank you, Tim. All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. The next item is the member selected internal audit report. Just looking at this, one point that I would like to make before we go into it, that I think this is, in my opinion, it's one of the worst reports that I've seen regarding the ignoring the comments of our internal audit staff, and I certainly feel it's not acceptable, considering that they've had quite some time and before COVID hit us to sort these issues out, and so few of the recommendations are still yet to be put in place, and I think that is totally unacceptable. But Lisa, would you like to introduce it now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Lachlan McKinnon, the audit manager, is going to present the report this evening. And we have Sean Cook, the Assistant Director for Adults Health and Social Care, as well, joining us.
Thank you.
I think you're on mute, Lachlan.
Lachlan, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I think I've solved that problem. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, just a bit of background to this one. The council is required to recharge the CCG for the health element of services provided to clients. This can involve a wide range of services, from mental health, individual service funds, care homes, daycare, direct payments, supported living, and involves many staff, and there's a variety of systems involved. So the audit was actually quite a complex piece of work, identifying all the systems in place. We did find one area that was very good in relation to individual service funds and home care. and there was good assurance there that all recharges were being made to the CCG. Unfortunately, this didn't apply across the board, and the audit identified that the council was losing substantial amount of money due to the lack of recharges to the CCG. Recommendations were made in November 2019 to improve controls in place, and there was a full agreement on the recommendations made that they would be implemented. And a recent follow-up identified that the arrangements were still weak, and quite a lot of the recommendations had not been implemented. A new action plan has now been issued to the service, and we will be revisiting it in 3 months' time to ensure that things have improved and the recommendations have been implemented. Sean Cook from the Directorate should be in attendance at this meeting, and if he is there, I'm sure he's happy to respond to members' questions.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you, Lachlan. Yeah, I would like to say it is a pleasure to give you feedback on this report, but unfortunately it's not. When the report came to my attention, the audit report, it was clearly the case that roles and responsibilities hadn't been identified in the process that should have been in place. There were no documented policies or procedures. CIS hadn't been updated when changes occurred to support plans, leading to the CCG, as Lachlan has said, not being charged appropriately. Evidence to support the decisions relating to CCG recharges were not always available. There were dual fields to note CCG contributions, leading to discrepancies. A large number of employees had access to changing the CCG contribution field, and procedures for ensuring that recharges were correct weren't in place, leading to a loss of income due to recharges not being made. So it didn't make good reading, and when it came to my attention, when I first arrived to the Directorate, I started to work with audit colleagues to identify immediately what we needed to do. And we've developed an action plan that already has actions in place. The first one being having an interim officer to take overall responsibility for the work. So a lot of changes have already taken place in terms of policy, process, and understanding for practitioners to understand what decisions should be in place that the interim officer will oversee. A policy has now or is being developed. It hasn't been completed yet because that needs to be done in concert with the CCG. And that also requires another policy aligned to it. So we've been doing this jointly with the CCG for Section 117 monies. So those are monies that we need to make sure are charged for people with mental health conditions. That has been aligned to the or is being aligned to the CHC policy. An email has been sent out to all social workers and assessors, reminding them of correct procedures in relation to recharging, including the responsibility to, as I said before, amend fields. And the email should also include a requirement for I should say, include a requirement for social workers to give sufficient detail in their case notes on CIS for CCG recharging. It should also include a reference to when and how CCG funding is agreed and the details of the panel where the decision has been made, ensuring that the panel notes are located on CIS and there's a full audit trail. It should also include when funding stops so that we're aware of that with details on CIS. and procedures should be documented and shared with social workers. We should also, IT have been consulted about the possibility of introducing a pop-up on the CIS system to remind social workers of their responsibilities in relation to recharging. That is being done now. We're working on a review and rescind policy for section 117 aftercare as stated, really, so that that ties in with our CHC policy as stated. We will also be looking at the policy recharging the CCG 50% of the cost of placements in EMI homes rather than 100%, as has been the case. We've also addressed that there should only be one field to use to show CCG contributions in CIS. Until a change of CIS has been made, IT should be consulted to see if a pop-up, as I've discussed, can be used to remind social workers of the need to do this. A review of CIS access will also be undertaken so that only social workers and officers who require access to this field for CCG recharging will be in place. The process for recharging CCG for residential and nursing placements will be reviewed to ensure correct value is recharged. And until the overall review process has been taken place, which will happen in October, there will be an agreement in place to ensure that the payments team will perform checks to ensure the correct value of funding is recharged. This will be need to be either payments continuing to maintain their list and to perform checks to ensure the correct value is recharged, and that the payments section is updated. The business transformation team, as part of a future adult social care transformation programme, will also look at the full review of all these processes and systems to make sure that they're fit for purpose for the future. And that they're built into all of the reviews that we're doing with all of the systems across the directorate over the next 3 years. In respect of 3 of the cases that were identified by the audit team that we needed to look at, and these have been addressed in terms of charges being made for care provided to a given service user, recharges, sorry. And then the review of 2 service users whereby there hadn't been recharges completed. These have now been completed and recharges have been given back to the council. And we've now ensured that checks are carried out to ensure all appropriate funding is recharged as part of the whole process. But unfortunately, in terms of what hadn't been done, it is a damning report, and we are aware that we need to act urgently with this action plan and to make sure that there's a follow-up review in December of this year, and before then to make sure that as much as possible we can reclaim the recharges that haven't been reclaimed by the council to date with the CCG. And that's just the overview of the action plan, Chair.
Right. Thank you for that, Sean. I appreciate that you are not responsible for this in any way, shape or form of why we got into this mess. And I appreciate the work that you're putting in to work with our audit team to make sure that you do comply in future. So thank you for that. Are there any questions from members? Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair.
Your sound is, you need to switch your sound on.
Sorry, have we got it now?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, I do have some questions. The first one is, don't know if Sean can answer this, but why would anybody not want to make these charges? You know, what motivation is underlying this. I mean, you know, if we need to make charges, we should make the charges. So that's one that just mystifies me. I don't quite understand it. But the next question is in the design of the system here, which has now been subject to an audit, and it's been found to be deficient. But, you know, in my experience of any system involving money, there needs to be authorization levels in place which allow some people to influence monetary decisions and not others. So the question there is there a level of authorization which is appropriate for the amounts of money that are being recharged or not? You know, if people are given authorization, well, then there should be an audit trail. I think, Sean, you mentioned, you know, there will be a full audit trail in future. If there's an audit trail in future, does that imply there isn't a proper audit trail now? However, if there is an audit trail now, we ought to know who is making these decisions. And I'm not, you know, suggesting for a moment this is a witch hunt or we talk about individuals here, but if we know who's making the decisions, then as part of the audit process, and no doubt you've done this, that there might be some kind of indication of repeat perpetrators, if that's the right word. It's the wrong word, but, you know, are the same people doing this all of the time? And it comes back to the original question is, what motives can there be for not recharging? So I know it's complex, but I think you've been nodding, so I think you understand what the questions are. So over to you.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Lee. I mean, in terms of people's motivations, it's not a case that there's been a deliberate or intent or a deliberate act not to make the charges. What I've detected over the last couple of months since we've been looking at this audit trail, and this links to the fact that there hasn't really been an update as far as our electronic recording system is concerned, CIS, that we use within adult social care. And different practitioners, assessors coming into the post, not being inducted properly. And the combination of that just alone, not understanding the system, not understanding the authorizations not actually being in the system in the way that, as you said, they should be, so that given people are given permissions to sign off funding and then to make sure recharges are in place. All of that hasn't been in place, really. And what Ian and I are working on is to ensure, and I've identified since I've been here, is that we want to make sure that our CIS system that hasn't been invested in for some time now is completely redesigned, or that we have an alternative, and a proposal has or will be made to the council to make sure that that happens. That said, there is no excuse for us not to have good, robust systems in place. So there certainly wasn't any intent. It was more a lack of, it was more a case of ignorance and lack of capacity and ability to do what should have been done as far as these recharges were concerned over a period of a number of years.
Thank you.
Jane, I think you're next.
Thank you for that, Sean. I think hit the nail on the head. You know, the system is not very good and it needs to be improved, clearly, and proper levels of authorization need to be put in place. We need to have proper induction. I'm sure we'll have learned that from this. But it's another example. This doesn't just happen in the public sector. It happens all over the place. People, for whatever reasons, and often fairly valid reasons, do strange things. And where money's involved, if it's not their money, they do very strange things. And so we need to get a grip on this as soon as possible. Clearly, you've made a start on it, but it's disappointing to hear that we've been operating such a basic system as this without it being properly designed, properly policed, and properly followed to the letter of authorisation level. So it is very disappointing, and I'm so glad that this is a report that this audit committee chose to have a look at first. And what a good job that we did. Thank you.
Jane, would you like to come in now?
Thank you. And like Stephen, my thanks to internal audit, really. It's what internal audit is for, really, is to find those things. And while we might like to congratulate ourselves on several things that are well run, I don't think we can do that in this case. Number of comments, a question to Sean, really. Clearly, reading the report, I was struck by how complex it was, really, in terms of understanding rules and keying in the right things and so on. And clearly that redesign of the CIS system, I don't know why it hasn't been done before, because certainly we've redesigned CIS for a number of other purposes. And by and large, although it's clunky, it is a good system. I must say, when you were talking, that it did sound, as Stephen indicated, a classic thing of somebody, social workers who, wanting to make sure that things were done for people, was making decisions rather than, and filling in forms, filling in boxes, rather than somebody who actually understood the sheer importance of actually putting the numbers in the right boxes. And I think what you say is about the levels of authorization, of actually reducing the number of people who have authorization to input that data is absolutely crucial in relation to that. But I suppose my question really is not about the people who weren't inducted or weren't properly trained on that system, but really about you as somebody relatively new to the authority. You're coming in, you've got a role as a manager, as assistant director, and a role in the governance of this, really. What would you say are the absolutely key things that you're going to focus on in terms of the culture and getting this right from here on in?
Thank you, Councillor Scully. It's just to touch on an earlier point that you raised. There is so many levels of complexity, sometimes unnecessary complexity, both created nationally and locally, that when you look into it, it's almost like a kind of geological formation. There's just one layer after a layer after a layer, and when you ask people about it, they've forgotten that it's existed, or it's just become custom and practice. And it's made more difficult sometimes, and it's no excuse when the complexity is added to in respect of what continuing healthcare funding is, and how it has to be literally discharged within adult social care and the council, and the guidance that we have to adhere to there. It's translating that then into the system, but we have completely neglected that here locally. And to answer your question, it's a more broader answer, really, which is Ian has brought me in to identify. I think one of the reasons was to ensure that as far as our systems, our custom, our practice, our culture, it's much more fit for purpose in terms of how we take responsibility for spend, but also outcomes for people than we've had previously. I mean, there's some really good practice across the directorate, but it's not consistent. And one of the reasons why I'm in the process of designing a 3-year transformation program is to look at all of our processes, our practice and culture as well, which usually takes about 3 or at least 3 years to turn around in terms of people's thinking. And within that as well, helping them understand, which in terms of the message that's already been sent out, helping them understand that this is public money and they have to treat it like their own. And that has been lost. I mean, it's not unique to Calderdale or aspects of Calderdale adult social care. It's happened elsewhere, where people don't think about the work and the outcomes that they need to work towards as far as fiscal responsibility, and sometimes hide behind the person, if I may say that. The two go hand in hand, and my mantra to all of the workforce has been, if we look at the quality and we get our systems right, the money will follow in respect of everything. So the 3-year transformation plan that we're designing is not just to look at this as one key aspect where we've hemorrhaged a lot of money, but all of our practice and all of our systems. And that will be built into a new pathway that CIS, if we can get the investment for that, will support, you know, for the foreseeable future, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, and will need to be updated accordingly. So my perspective is that there are pockets of really good practice, no fiscal grasp really from a practitioner point of view, but they're now beginning to get it in terms of where we need to go. And unfortunately, this is just one symptomatic area, but we're getting a grip.
Yes, James.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, you know, the report is disappointing, but it does make me glad at least that our internal audit has picked it up and it is now being addressed. So that gives me some comfort that process works to some extent. I think what surprises me a bit about this, though, is that we've known for a couple of years that we've been trying to essentially maximise the income possible within social care services, because we've known what pressure these services have been under. So you look a couple of years ago at the budgets of the council, there's budget lines in there about ensuring we get the maximum income into social care, and how, you know, and then to find out that is disjointed with the reality of what's happening on the ground due to kind of procedural failings and technical and administrative failings at the kind of practical level. And I wonder really, you know, when we get these audit reports, obviously they come back to us and we select some of them. I wonder what the role is for the lead member in these situations as well, to be keeping an eye on these things. And I wonder, you know, perhaps it's more of a question to Tim here as leader of the council, is when we get these reports in areas, you know, what additional pressure does the lead member do to help ensure that those, you know, working with the director in that area to ensure really that things do get changed and do get transformed? Because we can, otherwise we as councillors can vote through ideas and we can agree decisions that we want to maximise income, but if in practice things aren't being delivered and there's a failing somewhere between what the wishes of the director and the lead member are and what is happening at the coalface, then that is something I think needs some thought and consideration.
Do you wish to comment on that, Tim?
Yeah, I will. A little bit of a holding reply. It's a poor excuse, but I was on leave last week, so I haven't picked up and followed this up with with either the director or Councillor Metcalfe. I think it's a reasonable question, James. I'm not sure there is a consistent policy about when portfolio holders are told about internal audit reports. I think it often is picked up through the directorate briefings rather than separately through internal audit. And that's something I want to give a bit more consideration to. It is an issue I've sort of raised before. I mean, it's difficult because you know, I don't want to say every internal audit report should go to the lead member, because some of them are actually really quite detailed and relatively small scale. But I will have a little bit more of a look into background around this one. I think in terms of budget lines, I mean, I may be wrong. I invite Sean to sort of come back and comment on this. I mean, I think there's probably been two kind of things going on here, because I think often the focus in kind of maximising income from the CCG, particularly around continuing care, has often been more around the social care assessment side and making sure that every case that is eligible for continuing healthcare funding as opposed to normal social care funding is properly assessed. And obviously that has benefits to us, because it then means that the care should be funded by the CCG, but actually it also has benefits to the service user themselves, because it has impacts for, you know, for it being fully funded through healthcare rather than them having to make a contribution. And I suspect the same, I think, I'm digging back into memory really, my time of age concern, but I think the same applies with section 117 things as well. And I wonder if what's tended to happen is there's been the focus on making sure the assessments are right, so that in terms of headlines we're maximising it, but then the processes and actually identifying what the detailed costs are and recharges is where things have broken down. But that's only my take from reading the exec summary, and I'll invite Sean to correct me if I've got it wrong.
No, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Swift. Unfortunately, we've shot ourselves in the foot in that people have, as I touched on earlier, have focused on the assessment and the person, but not focused on the fact that there should be a process in place that is the recharging process in this case, and that they should be adhering to that. It's been more a case of really good assessments. There's been no issue as far as that's concerned, but a complete neglect as far as the process is concerned.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Jane, do you want to come in?
I just wanted to say, I think it's, in some ways it's classic, really. No excuses, of course, but people come into particular jobs, particularly in the care sector, to be social workers and to be people focused and people centered. And that's what we want from them. And what we've got to try and overlay on that is actually, you know, the fiscal duties and an understanding of how important that is to continuing to be able to focus on people, really. And that's the cultural change that Sean was touching upon, really. And that's what's really difficult, because people say, well, I didn't come into social work to fill in these forms or whatever. There's a real challenge there, and there's a lot of detail there to work on. And I look forward to seeing the update report that we get next.
Yeah, Nigel.
Just a quick comment, if I may, Chair, in terms of the question about where this is raised, certainly in terms of the financial implications, having identified this problem, then we'll look to make sure through the budget challenge sessions that we have with both the director and the lead member, then we can pick up the financial implications in terms of the impact upon the budget. We can pick that up there.
Right, thank you for that. Stephen, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief comment. In our audit report for the year that we submitted to the last council meeting, one of the comments I made in there, I think, is very relevant in this case, and that is that audit is a very important thing. And if you're running a business correctly, the prospect of being audited shouldn't hold any problems. You know, if you're running it, you want to run the business properly or the organisation, audit will just merely confirm that you're doing it properly. And, you know, when it's not being done properly, this is why this process is so important. And I'm very pleased, Sean, I believe you're new to the council, that you're getting a good grip on this. Often things are driven by good intentions, but, you know, it kind of gets lost what the original objective is. So this is why, and for our visitors to this meeting tonight, glad to see you here. This is why an audit committee is so important. This is our work in action. And so, Chair, I think it's great that we're getting a grip on something that clearly hasn't been right, and I'm sure that we will get it right. And there's a positive that's come out of it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Well, I tend to feel like this is because we do have a fully independent internal audit. They, you know, they stick to their job and do it regardless. And perhaps a way forward, Tim, is if when Lisa or Nigel feel that there is a problem, as Nigel already does on the financial aspects of it, but, you know, as an internal audit, they look at a lot of other aspects that they have delegated authority to contact you and you know, to see whether you feel it's all right to go further.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Lisa and her team for the work they've done on this. I think it's been a very good, thorough thorough job and the follow-up as well. And Sean, if you'd have been in charge when this work was first picked up, I think you would have had a much harder ride this evening. But thank you very much for coming along and taking the stick for something that you're not responsible for, but very pleased that you are working hard with Lisa to ensure that things are right in the future. So thank you very much for that.
Councillor Dacus wishing to speak.
Yes, Sylvia, do you want to come in?
No.
Yes, thank you. Just touching on the topic of Cabinet members coming to this meeting. Well, the reason I came to this meeting was because I am a new Cabinet member for resources. And so a report like this was clearly, to me, absolutely vital, because the council need all the resources it can get, and it clearly hasn't been getting them through various systemic rather than personal faults. So I think when Tim, when you're thinking about it, I think that probably all of us, all of Cabinet members, need to be looking at the agenda and thinking whether there is anything appropriate there. But I think it is difficult for individual employees to realise the scope, that the impact of their individual actions. And so the work you're doing, Sean, I think will really help there, that they will be able to be reminded that what they're doing as an individual has consequences. And as you say, as everybody said, I'm sure none of them are doing this deliberately. And the other point I simply wanted to make was that in relation, I'm also the lead member for IT, and I will be doing everything I can in that role to ensure that you're given all the assistance that you need to make sure that the system is fit for purpose and helps the employees to do their job properly, rather than being a positive barrier as it is at the moment. And also, obviously, I'll be participating in the budget challenges with Nigel, where these sorts of things can be addressed in the future.
Welcome, thank you.
Right, thank you for that. Any other comments? So are we all happy to accept this report and move on? Yeah, everybody's okay with that. So thank you very much again. So the next item is the tracking report 2021.
Thank you, Chair. I hope all members have received a copy of the appendix to this report now. I believe Janet emailed it out this afternoon if you didn't get it in the earlier pack. This is the usual tracking report which I present to each meeting. It does give members an overview of all the audit reports which have been conducted this year to date, plus any that have been conducted last year where we haven't yet done the follow-up. I'm happy to expand and give further details on any of the reports that are shown in there to give you progress in terms of implementation of recommendations or whether we've had any further responses. Members usually use this report that there are no new week audits showing on the tracking report, and there's nothing standing out to me as something I would suggest. I'm happy to take suggestions from members, but bearing in mind it is quite a full agenda at the next meeting. We do have the accounts presented, the annual governance statement, and Mark Cole is coming along to do a presentation on the developments on project management, which is linked to an audit, which is on the tracking report. But as I say, I'm happy for member suggestions or any questions on the tracking report at all.
Yeah. Are there any questions or observations people want to make? Yes, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Lisa, I only received the report, I think we all did this afternoon, and I didn't have a lot of opportunity to read it in full. What I'm always interested in is significant variations, and in terms of the appendix that we received, you know, those are marked in red. And you've just said that there was nothing new that came up there. So therefore, the things in red presumably were already in red. And so you know, all of the things that are all green and go, go, go are fine with me. It's the reds that we need to be interested in. And so this isn't a suggestion about what we might do. It's just to ask you whether the reds we can live with the reds for the time being, but, you know, can we have some assurances that they're the ones that we'll be giving some more urgent attention to, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. To give you assurance, Councillor, wherever there is a red marked on the tracking report, we always do follow-up work on those, and members will receive a report on the progress made. Like the CCG one, that was a red one. We've done a follow-up and it is still red, and we will do another follow-up until it changes from red, and you'll be notified accordingly on that. You will perhaps note that the tracking report is small. There's less audits on there than there might normally be at this time of year. That's partly to do with the work, internal audit we're doing on COVID at the beginning of the year. But again, to give members assurance, we are making sure that the audit plan is flexible and fluid and looking at priorities as they arise. We're consulting with SIPFA and regionally to ensure that we are picking up priorities and ensuring that enough audit coverage is conducted this year in order to be able to reach an opinion at the end of the year. But we will bring a progress report on that to the next meeting.
Thanks, Lisa. That is indeed reassuring. Thanks a lot.
Any other comments or observations? Do we, with the number of items we have at the next meeting, do you still want to bring a report on one of the internal audits, Lisa?
Well, I was suggesting that there isn't one that stands out, so maybe we could leave it off the next agenda if you're happy with that, Chair, and if other members are happy.
Right, yeah. Are we all happy for that to be put aside for the next meeting? Right, thanks very much. Right, the next one is the Audit Committee Work Programme.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is just a normal report. This looks at the forward plan for the next meeting, which you'll see is scheduled for the end of November. Then where we'll consider the statement of accounts and an update on the annual governance statement as a result of the change in deadlines brought about by COVID on the accounts and audit regulations. In addition, there'll be the half-year reports on treasury management, risk management, internal audit, and as I mentioned earlier, items on the project management position. I've also put on there a report on the Redmond review to inform audit committees, a summary of what arose from that and the implications for the council. If members would like to suggest anything else to be added to the work programme, let me know and I will add it on.
Is everybody happy with the work programme as it's listed? Yes, Stephen. Your sound's off, Stephen.
Sorry. Lisa, I noticed that on the work programme on the 30th of November, we've got proposed changes to project management arrangements. I think, as you, I'm sure know, I'm very interested in that, and I think that you know, some considerable work is due to be performed on that, and I'm just concerned about the amount of work that we're taking on here in November. Will we be able to make proposals regarding project management in that time frame?
I think you will be given every opportunity to do so at the meeting, Stephen, and if need be, we can bring it back at a later date as well. But I think to prejudge what the information, I think one thing that would be, which would be useful, is if we could have some of these reports will be quite detailed. If we could have them a little earlier than just the week before.
Agreed, Chair. Yeah.
If that's possible, Lisa.
I will speak to Janet and we'll try to arrange that.
Yeah, doesn't have to have all of them, you know, just as and when they've become available, possibly to send them out piecemeal, as it were, for us. It just gives us a bit more time to read through things.
We'll have a discussion and see what we can do before the next meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Thanks very much. Everybody okay with that? Yes, Richard, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Just a real quick one on the items for Ernst & Young due to the next audit committee. Just wanted to quickly assure members that the audit has progressed. The reason we have not brought our ICE 260 to this committee is that we are reliant on assurances from the pension fund auditor for West Yorkshire Pension Fund. I spoke to them last week. They are intending to give us those assurances in mid to end October. So we are on track for that one. The second point I just wanted to quickly raise in regard to that plan is that you have a local government briefing paper due for the 30th of November. Again, we would usually bring these to each committee. One of the impacts of the pandemic across the sector has been that it is an ever-changing situation, and so we're trying not to bring you out-of-date information. At the last audit committee, we did give you what was available at the latest point there. I am hopeful that the next one will be released in time for that committee. If it isn't, then again we will just give you a verbal update of what we're seeing across the sector and bring you the latest paper as and when it's available.
Thank you very much. So are we okay with that? Thank you.